Welcome back to our next episode of Creatives Who Thrive. I'm your host, Deven Berryhill. We're glad you're here. We're excited for our guest today. He's a friend that I met maybe 10, 12 years ago now. In a regular frequency, I'd say probably in the last 3 or 4 years, we've been in contact mostly through the Musicians Hall of Fame, which you work with. But please welcome with me, Smilin Jay McDowell.
Hello, Deven. How you been?
Good, man. So where are you in the world?
I am in Nashville, Tennessee, and just excited about your whole new project here. I've enjoyed it so far, and honored to be asked to be a part of it. I'm happy to tell you, what little I know. I'm happy to share.
Well, it's a lot. I know it is, because you've got quite an extensive background. You've done some amazing things, and you continue to do amazing. You're one of those people that I've met on my journey that I'm like, wow, I want to hang out with that person. You know what's going on in a lot of ways. So I appreciate you being on the show, and we'll get right to it. So Creatives Who Thrive. We're talking about, people who discovered they were a creative probably at a young age. You're a musician. Tell us kind of that first, give us the Reader's Digest Jay McDowell story of how you got into music and all that.
Yeah. Well, like your other guests that I've seen your show, that it's a mixture of everything, whether it's drawing or painting or music or writing, visual, audio. At a young age, I seem to see the connection between all of those, that there's rhythm and pacing in life, not just music, but there's the way that all these things seem connected in my brain, that I think is a common thing with creatives, that something you discover in one medium, you can start to apply to another medium. And my whole life has been that. It's been a series of chain reactions that music has always been at the center of it. But I see that writing is, I take from music and apply it to writing, or for photography or drawing. It's all connected in my brain, and that's the way I have to process it. So to answer your question, as a child, my parents were very influential, and my mother was an art teacher. My father was a computer programmer, both musical. So I've kind of had the resources around me since I started, whether it was musically or otherwise, artistic wise. Mm-hmm. And as I've grown, obviously music has always been at the heart of everything, but playing a musical instrument, always involved in different outlets. As I got old enough and music became a occupation, I needed other outlets, and that led me to art and video editing, which is a big part of my being. But again, music is at the core of that as well. And so I started doing TV and film work, and then that led me to the Musicians Hall of Fame. They needed a video guy, And that was my entry into that when the museum was starting out. And that's my regular job now, is working at the museum.
Sure. So tell us, I know you were in a pretty successful band back in the day. BR5-49, you played the stand-up bass.
Right.
Tell us, I mean, you pretty cool stuff. I looked at some of the YouTube videos. If you're watching, look up BR5-49. You'd say kind of a rockabilly Americana type outfit, a little bit of little country western in there, a little swing. Tell us, just give us a story on that a little bit, because you guys did some amazing things. You had multiple albums. You had an album deal. You toured Europe. I mean, you did a lot of cool stuff. I saw you on Conan. Were you on Conan? I think you were on Conan too. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, we got to do all the late night TV shows and meet all my heroes, and it's too much to even.
Well, how'd you get into it? I mean, what happened? Give us the bit. You guys were downtown. You played you kind of started down on the strip there in Nashville, right?
Yeah. It's exactly not the way to do a band. Everything that happened to us was backwards and crazy. We were playing for tips in a Western wear shop. It wasn't even a typical place to play, but we just took over the stage and played every night, and just trying to hustle tourists for tips, and just trying to eat, and never dreaming that we'd get a record deal or travel or, but we were able to, we signed a record deal with Arista, and I remember them kind of talking about how to market it. And they were asking us, well, what are you? Are you country? Are you rock? Are you alternative? Are you punk rock? What are you? And right. I remember kind of saying, that's not my job. That's up to the record label. You guys figure that out. We took elements of different types of country music and swing and rockabilly and just played what we liked. And it really struck a chord with people. Just people came and danced. And so much of Nashville is jaded music people. It was really odd to have a place where kids would dance, and we'd play every night and get this great reaction. And there wasn't a regular audience member. It was all over the map. It was all ages, all types, all backgrounds, all education levels. So that was a really exciting time. And this was in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s. Okay. And so then we started making records and putting out albums and traveling to promote them. What was ironic was it turned into a business where we would record an album and then spend a year on the road promoting it and playing live. And that was exciting and fun for the first few cycles. But then after 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 years of that, it started to feel less creative. I didn't have an outlet. There was a creative outlet for a couple weeks. We'd go in the studio, and that was exciting and fun. And then we'd go on the road again and promote it. And what I started to do from while we were on the road, I started videotaping just home video stuff. And because we were in these amazing situations and meeting all these fascinating people and in these foreign places, I was just filming it for my own fun. And then I started editing on the bus and figuring out how to chop this video together. And the computer editing thing was just starting to happen, where it was accessible to you and I, as opposed to being in a big edit house with $1 million equipment. So Sony, our record label at the time, I went to them with this video footage, and I said, hey, I've got some good stuff here. And people were starting to put out CDs with DVDs and DVD bonus things. And so I was saying, we've got all this footage with Bob Dylan and John Fogerty and us with the Black Crowes and all this great stuff. Well, Sony said, we can't do anything. The Dixie Chicks are suing us. There was a lawsuit that dragged out for a long time, and Sony's hands were tied and they couldn't release anything. So I think to just appease me, they said, well, we've got an edit bay here. If you'd like to mess around with some of the footage, you're welcome to use it.
Yeah.
So I took him up on it. I started coming in every day. And if we weren't on the road traveling, I would go in from 8 to 5 and start digging in to figure out how to edit and calling on favors of old friends that were in that business and getting them to show me things. And I started editing footage just for a hobby and just to learn it.
Yeah.
What I found was that was an artistic outlet that I could do. And then Sony they saw that I was into it and was serious about it. And they started throwing me little jobs to do for their artists. And I did a few EPKs and some work on some video projects. Did some stuff with Merle Haggard, Marty Stewart. And so I was in heaven because I was being able to be creative, and it wasn't just the little bits of time we got in the studio to record.
Sure.
That was still fun. I loved doing that as well. But in that world, I could see like, hey, this is something that's creative every day. I can be doing it. So when I stepped out of the band after 9/11 happened, I wanted to be home and start a family. And so I just stepped over into Sony and started doing TV work and video editing. And that was like a perfect marriage of my father, who was a computer programmer, my mother, who was an art teacher. I started realizing that's where the crossover was happening.
Yeah.
It all made sense to me. Of course, I'd be in video editing for that background. Everything's musical when you're editing video. It's you have to tap into the rhythms and
timing.
And so it's all music. It's all math. It's all of it. But what I found was, even if I was doing a mundane dishwashing detergents commercial, it was creative, and I was cranking out content. And I loved the process. I loved the filming of it. I loved taking the elements and putting it together, and how things work and how things get certain reactions from viewers that we take for granted. We don't, you're watching TV, you don't even realize things that are being sold to you and elements that are at play. That was fascinating to me. So I found myself really diving into the video world, which there's a lot of that in Nashville. There's a lot of music related projects that I could work on.
Sure.
And that's what, ultimately led me to the Hall of Fame. Now we do a TV show through the Musicians Hall of Fame. Your father was a guest on one of our episodes.
That was a good one.
I've gone through all the old vault footage. We call it the Vault series, and take these old interviews with these musicians, and they're just amazing stories that we get to share. And so we built up a nice YouTube subscribership and following, and it's been really good for the museum, especially in this time where we've been, we were literally shut down for a bit from the pandemic, and now we're open limited hours, but we're back up and running. But that was a thing that I could focus on during that time to still be involved in doing something to benefit the museum while we were shut down.
Sure. Now, I want to go back to something you were talking about, that transition. So coming out of the band, and the band's been going maybe 8-9 years. I could relate. I had a similar situation. I started my family in 2000 and had our first child. And I was kind of at the zenith of my guitar touring career, playing with some pretty well-known musicians in the Christian music scene. And I remember, I don't know if you felt this. You have a daughter, right? How many kids do you have?
3, son, daughter, son.
Oh yeah. Well, my daughter, I don't know if you felt this, but, and this ties in with the monetization side. It's like, yeah, you're out there playing. Of course, you've got you've got a wife and kids at home kind of thing. And I would go out and come back, month, 6 weeks later, whatever it was. And then, I'd look and I missed that period of time in my daughter's life, my youngest Jane, and she looked different. Like her facial features literally changed.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it. And that, I don't know about you, but that tore me up inside. I was like, I didn't have kids just to be gone.
Right.
I got married because I love the woman I married. I want to be with her. I love her. She's my best friend. And then you have the kid, and it's like, wait, I don't want to be the absent dad, right? I want to be there. I love my child. And I, like you was started to, I got into education, music education, where I was teaching and found I could be creative in that. But I did want to talk to you a little bit about the transition there into when you went to work for Sony. And, again, feel free to share as much or little or none as you'd like. But I kind of want to drill down a little bit on how you negotiated that for our listeners. If, you're sitting down, let me put maybe a scenario, maybe you can adapt the scenario, but you've done maybe some initial things you've done for free. They've checked it out and they're like, yeah, we can use that. And maybe they threw you a few bucks here and there, but then it got into like the point where like I'm an employee for Sony. Can you kind of share how that worked?
Sure. Well, I'll step back from that even and think about when I joined the band. I was a guitarist growing up. I didn't play bass. So I jumped into that band with a new instrument, and that was exciting, and it made it a challenge, and it was invigorating and a great unknown. I went into it not cocky and arrogant, like, yeah, I'm the guy. I went in being like, I just got this bass and it's new to me, the upright bass being. I played electric bass. But the reason I go back to that is jumping into the video world, it was the same kind of excitement and uncertainty and uneasiness and trying to figure out, traverse those waters was a parallel feeling. And I came into it with I know Sony liked the way that I approached things, and they could see that I wanted to tell stories, whether it was a music video, whether it was a promo piece about an artist, whether it was something that it had a beginning and a middle and an end. It had some structure to it. And that was something that I could tell that they believed in me in that regard. Now, when it was you kind of laid it out exactly the way it happened. Sony would almost like, oh, isn't that cute? He's doing some video editing, Right. That was kind of the vibe I got from them at first. And then it was like, oh, he's really doing this. Like I'd show them some pieces that I'd put together of just my home video stuff and some things that I was just using as a tool to learn the process.
Sure.
And then I remember the video, the head of video there saying, wow. And I think it was a case where she was kind of under the gun, needed something like, can you crank something out? It doesn't have to be good. It just needs to be done. And I remember kind of having that moment of, oh, can I commit to this? Can I deliver? And I said, I'll give it my best shot. And I did, and it worked. And in hindsight, it was a very simple task. It wasn't hard, but that day I didn't know enough to know that it was a simple task. And I took it on and I pushed through and saw it through. So then it became where they knew that they could count on me and they would give me a little more weighty projects and a little more heavy things to do. It was typically negotiated. So I wasn't hired by Sony as a full-time employee. It was I was a freelance worker for them. Although I was on site. To everybody else that worked for the label, they kind of looked at me as if I worked for the label. I was there on site. Right. They knew me as an artist first, as a musician. So they were familiar with me already. And then, as the years went through, as things happen in record labels, there's a lot of turnover and people change, people leave, people retire. What I found was twofold. Some of my biggest confidants and people that would cheer for me had moved on and left. Mm-hmm. And my first thought was like, oh, I don't have the contacts here as much as, these other people coming in maybe have other go-to people for these video jobs. What I found, though, is conversely, those people went off into other, not even music or labels, they would go to other labels, they would get other jobs around the country, around the world. And they would reach out to me, hey, I work for Amazon now and we need this promo video. Can you do this? And, something similar to what you did for us at Sony.
Right.
So then I realized like this networking thing, the music business is tiny, and how as it evolves and spreads that you still have these contacts. And I looked at that at first as a bad thing. And then over time, I realized that was a godsend. That was an amazing thing to have these contacts in these other industries. And they knew that I was reliable and I could, I would show up when I was expected to and get the job done. So
yeah,
that transition, doing Sony stuff for 5 or 6 years, I got a job with HGTV and editing for them. And if you watch HGTV has a brand. Any show you put on, any time on HGTV has a certain feel to it. It's called something different, and it maybe has different graphics, but the content you're watching is all very similar. And it's
formula.
It's familiar. It's formula. It's you know what you're going to get. And I wasn't even aware of that certain channels do that until I was in that world, and I realized, it shapes some of your decisions as you're working, and some of your creative. You start knowing where to follow the formula and what it needs to be and what it needs to do. So now when I watch TV, I see it in a different light, that I realize that different channels, not all channels, but different channels have their brand, and they want you to be able to go to them any time of day or night, and you're going to get what you expect. So again, great for the experience and the crunch of TV schedules. Something I like about TV is this episode is going to air Wednesday night at 7 p.m.
Right.
It's, you can work on it's like drawing a picture. You can keep drawing and keep working on it. And is it ever done? At what point is this picture done?
Right.
With a TV show, it's done.
Deadline.
You have a deadline. And I love that, because you can work on a project until, if people give you a unlimited budget and unlimited time frame, that's the worst case, because at some point you've got to say this is done. And I do like that about TV, that this has to go on the air. It is what it is. There's times when I've been super satisfied and super happy with my work. There's other times when I've been like, I can't believe this is going out on the air right now, but it's going out on the air right now because it's the deadline.
Right.
So that's a big part of that world. I really felt that the parallel of learning a new instrument or learning a new operating system, when you're editing video, there's different platforms you use. There's different programs that you start to learn as you use different platforms, that they're all based on the same thing. You're getting to the same place in the end, but slightly different tools to get. They're all pretty similar, and but jumping into a new platform was exciting and new to me as well. So that was a neat thing. And I really, again, going back to how music is at the core of everything, that whether it's, I write about music, I do videos, projects about music, I make music. That is the common thread through all of it, for sure.
I want to, if possible, if you could place us in a room with you, and you're sitting down with HDTV, let's say, or somebody else. Maybe you want to use somebody else, so it's a little less. You want to give all the trade secrets away, but what's that? Do the negotiating contract yourself in that, correct? You don't have a separate agent who does that, or management,
right? No, it's just.
Place us in a room. Can you place us in a room? I mean, how's that conversation go? Because I'm thinking of somebody watching right now. They're like, okay, I'm a video editor. I have an acumen for it. I've had a certain modicum of the success, but I'm such an artist, and it's hard for me to kind of communicate my needs, what I need, but at the same time, listen and hear what their needs are. And like you said, the values and the format that they have. And then, you know, it's like, well, with a lot of artists, it's like, how do you put value? You know, there's this perceived value of your video versus something Spielberg would make, right? You know, it's like you both get, you know, give me a 3-minute or a 1-minute commercial. Spielberg, you know, he charges, you know, $2 million, right? And you know, somebody else would charge a lot less. So I don't know. Can you put us in a room maybe where a scenario, how that would happen for somebody, maybe if they wanted to scale up a little bit?
So it's always different in every situation with negotiating a job. In the video world, it's, you know, there's a lot of, it's a gig that you get asked to do a lot of favors. There's a lot of carrots dangled for you that, you know, hey, do this job and it'll lead to this. And you got to kind of sniff those out like anything. With network TV, there's a little more stability, and it's not always stable, but as far as paychecks, but again, like I said, the thing that, you know, there's a deadline, this has to be on, and you know, when you deliver, you get paid. You know, that there's those kind of contracts. With a record label, now I was spoiled to start working with Sony because even though sometimes the wheels would move slow, they would move. I would get paid, and it was always kind of negotiated front end. You know, hey, we'll give you $750 if you do this little project. And again, it was kind of up to me to budget my time. How much do I put? You know, you can find yourself working overnight and, you know, spending 48 hours of work and realizing you're only bringing home $750. So if you realize like, hey, I can get this done in 5 hours, you know, then you realize like, oh, I'm making good money. So it's this always give and take with your time and budgeting your time. That's the hardest thing with that, being a self-employed in any capacity. That's the hardest thing sometimes. But in a creative outlet, you've got to budget and tell yourself, what is my time worth, and to make that an important thing. Like I said, there wasn't a simple answer. It wasn't like, oh, this is what I do to negotiate a job. You have to feel it out, and you start getting things like with Sony. I would have things kind of established. They kind of, you know, as I became reliable and they knew they could count on, then I could say, this is what I need to make out of this, or you know, I just talk to them honestly, like, what's your budget for that? What can you give me for this? And
right,
you know, that goes a long way too, because again, you're not trying to take advantage of anybody. You certainly don't want to be taken advantage of, but you know, there's give and take in that world, of course.
So over time and experience, you kind of knew, okay, if they want a 3-minute music video for a song, for instance, or even maybe an EPK for a band. EPK, for those of you who don't know, is an electronic press kit that usually bands put on a website, send out digitally in a Dropbox or something that has your bio, your photos, video, usually some kind of interview video, maybe combined with some live footage, maybe, you know, really showcasing what the band could do. But it's long enough to give the potential promoter or record company an idea of what the band is, but it's tasty. It's cut in a way that's
you want to convey a story. You're telling a story.
Yeah.
Why do I care about this young girl singer? Why do I care about this group that's from, you know, where are they from? What's their background? Context. Art, that leads me into this whole other rabbit hole, but context in art is where it's at. And I'm fascinated by that. Think of music. You hear a song for the first time, it doesn't necessarily grab you. Some music grabs you the first time you hear it, but there's so many times you hear a song and it goes right past you. And then you learn something that's unique about that song, or the songwriter, or the way it was recorded, or you know, it's some context that the second time you hear the exact same recording, it's suddenly, oh, I really like that song. And it makes you listen differently. And repetition, you know, you hear a song the 5th time and suddenly it's stuck in your brain. And
sure.
And I realize that there's that context is such a big thing with it. So doing a promo thing for a record label, again, you're trying to give it some context. Why do I care about this new act? And there's a new act every day for, you know, and think about promoters and people that are being bombarded from every direction with these new artists. And why do I care about this one? Why do I care about this one? I'm trying to give you a reason and some context to why you want to discover this new artist. So that was a big part of it. And exciting for me to be involved with that, and the storytelling was fun.
What do you think the context was? Maybe getting off topic a little bit, but what do you think the context was maybe later as the record company executives at Sony excuse me, that kind of launched BR5-49?
Well, our context was that we were coming at it from the exact opposite direction that you would try to get a record deal. We were playing for tips. We were in a boot store. It wasn't, we had the name BR5-49. That's not accessible to people. What is that? It's a bunch of letters and numbers. For those that don't know, that was the HeHaw phone number from the old TV show HeHaw. They would do a skit every week about just called BR5-49. It was a used car lot kind of send up. But again, to the regular person who stumbled upon us, it didn't make sense. None of, we were dressing in kind of old timey, Western wear. We were playing these old instruments. It was a mixture of all these different elements. It was postmodern. So there was a story to tell. Now, there was suspicion on people's minds of, well, this band, they're obviously put together and it's a put on. Somebody's put these guys together and
it's a boy band.
Yeah, they're doing this old timey music and this shtick, and they're, and it was our job to kind of convince people, no, we're just guys that love this music, and we got together and we're playing what we love, and once you kind of cracked through that, you could convince people that we were doing it for the right reason. And that's another thing with creativity is why are you doing it? Why, that's something for one of your viewers to ask themselves, to turn it back on yourself. I hear it every day here in Nashville. People move to Nashville, which I encouraged. If you're into country music, Nashville is the place to be.
Sure.
If you're a screenwriter, you want to be in Southern California. I mean, it just makes sense. You want to be where it's at. Now, there's constantly the argument that, well, with the internet, you can do it from anywhere. True, you can have access. If you're a songwriter, you can get it out there through the internet. But you're going to be a lot more in the moment if you're physically where it's happening, and Nashville's where it's happening. If you're working with other people, and that goes so far. But I hear it every day. I want to be the next big thing. I want to make it. I hear that constantly. Well, what does making it mean to you?
Right.
That's
right.
Making it to you is different than making it to me. Making it to her is different than making it to him. And the idea that, I shine that back on them. What does making it to you mean?
Yeah.
Does that mean that you have your private plane and you get to go everywhere? Is that making it to you? And I see it that to other people, the most successful musicians, music artists, they still deal with obstacles that, you think, oh, point, the Rolling Stones don't have any trouble. The Rolling Stones have a whole lot of logistic nightmares and scheduling and trying to get things in a business that big that affects a whole lot of people, that you and I would be like, boy, it would sure be nice to have made it like that. And then once you kind of see into that world, oh, they have their own troubles and a whole different set of problems. But I don't know, it's a thing of, you have to know what you want to get out of it yourself before you open that up.
Yeah.
I looked at BR5-49, that was more successful than I ever dreamed that I would be. And in the big picture, we barely were a drip in the bucket, but it was more, it opened more doors for me professionally, artistically, than I could have ever imagined. And those connections I still benefit from, and I still tell people, careful what you wish for.
Might just get it. Yeah, that's so good, Jay. That's super good. And I like what you talked about community as well. It's like there you move, you're in a scene, this idea of kind of being the lone wolf, the lone ranger, starving artist, kind of on your own. and hoping somebody will discover you thing, I think is we're kind of dispelling that myth in this show, and I'm sure many others would agree that, you know, being there when the crumb drops, so to speak, you're able to catch the crumb before it hits the ground.
Yeah, and
Right there.
I've heard other people mention this too, that you have to have the goods when you're called on, but you
Yeah.
got to be there to be called on. So
Right.
and it's you know, there's drive you have as an artist. There's, for instance, my writing, I just sit down at a computer and start typing. I make myself do it every day. There are times when I say, oh, I need to write a column for this magazine or do this, but every day I just start typing and stuff comes out, and it's therapeutic. It pulls things out, memories that I don't even realize I have, and these things come to the surface, and that's a real good outlet for me. But to be a part of a scene where people are doing the same thing in Nashville, that's a common thread. These people are playing. It's a community where everybody seems to have a similar goal. It's a small, tight-knit thing. If one example is, there was a player, he got a gig doing a real cookie cutter singer, and he was playing keyboards in this singer's band, and he hated it. Was beneath him to, it was a paycheck to him, and he really was disgusted by taking this job, and he looked at it like it wasn't artistic. It was just fitting into the right thing to do this summer tour. And he really, you know, expressed that to his friends. Well, he got called in to the production office and was let go, and he took it as like, oh, well, good, I didn't want this job anyway. What I saw happen then over the next 18 months, 2 years, he didn't get for gigs that he did want to get because he wasn't a team player, and he was, you know, that showed me right away that that stuff reverberates out into the universe, and he definitely learned his lesson from that. And I you know, I could see both of that. I could see his frustration in that situation. It was just to handle it the right way, and was vocal about it. But it definitely, you know, he definitely learned the hard way from that one.
Yeah, no, that's a great piece of wisdom. I've heard that in many of the interviews, is, you know, taking advantage of even the small things, you know, things that we perceive as small, and doing your best at it. That reverberates like a pebble in a pond. Mm-hmm. And also, you know, be careful what you say, especially on the internet, right?
Yeah.
You know, you put social media so filled with politics and people venting their thing, and it's like, you have no idea that first of all, I mean, I guess you could go back and delete, but it's out there. Right, you know, right. People have, maybe someone has quoted you or copied and pasted or took that photo or whatever, and it's like, hey, I mean, maybe you can speak to that.
Well, yeah, and my example of the guy that had the gig that he didn't like, I don't know what the right answer, you know, I mean, obviously he didn't handle it correctly, but he wasn't happy to begin with. So, you know, it's, I don't know the real answer there. All I know is that it's a small community and it's tight knit, and I think the scene in any place is that way. Yeah. And sure, with social media, it spreads like wildfire, and that's sure. Certainly a thing to think about. So much of success in a creative situation, to me, is reliability. Are you reliable? Will you show up when you're supposed to? I don't know why, but that's the biggest killer that I see in Nashville. Is a guy takes a gig, whether it's a sideman or or it's in any capacity, a grip, just an extra hand on a music video. You're supposed to be here at 7 a.m. Hey, where's Jeff? I don't know. Let me text him. 10:30 shows up and Jeff responds, "Oh, sorry, man. You didn't need me anyway." Like I wasn't, and just the idea that, like, you say you're going to be somewhere, be there. And for some reason, people blow stuff off constantly. And I've seen a whole lot of musicians who are of much less talent, because they show up when they're supposed to show up, get the gigs and keep the gigs and treat people with respect. And that trumps a difficult musical genius. That's advice again to starting out musicians is, if you commit to be somewhere, be there. And it seems like you shouldn't have to say that, but I have to say that.
Yeah. Well, that's great, man. Thank you for definitely underlining that. That's key. I want to move in. I sent you a number of questions before this, but I did want to focus on number 5 on the list. Are there any specific things you are currently doing that's really working as it pertains to monetization of your creative work?
So I work at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. We honor session and sidemen and women of all styles of music. So the people behind the scenes, from the engineers to the producers to the songwriters, the musicians themselves. That's what we are all about. So we have a channel, a YouTube channel that we started for the museum to help, along with our other social media outlets, to share a video. We started a TV show called Backstage, interview show, and shines light on these musicians. And there's plenty of names that are recognizable, but our purpose is really to share the stories of these musicians that aren't household names and the people that are behind the scenes. But as you dive into them, you start realizing their stories are about songs and albums that you grew up hearing and that everybody knows. And that's where we started the channel for. And that the channel is getting near 15 million views now. We've got about 95,000 subscribers and growing, and it's just been really a good tool. And for me, it's a great outlet because I can be putting out video every day, working on those projects, and it's very music nerd oriented, which is in my wheelhouse, and I really love it. It's great for the viewers that realize out there that they, it's great to realize there's a whole community of that people that are craving these deep dives into these music history things. That is where I'm so comfortable being.
Sure. Yeah. No, I've watched the program, the Backstage. Of course, I saw the one that you did on my dad. That was fantastic. You guys also do maybe every 3 or 4 years, you do a Musicians Hall of Fame award show, right? And that's what we were a part of.
We induct
last year
a class. It started out, the goal was to do it every year, but it's such a big endeavor that it's every few years now. And we, those are amazing shows. And to get this group of musicians and these class of inductees that come and put on these live shows, it's mind blowing to get to go to one of those. And it was a big highlight for me when y'all came and played. I guess it was 2019 that y'all came and did that.
Yeah, last show. Yeah, that was an amazing event. I have to thank you for this personally. We were backstage actually downstairs at the Schermerhorn Theater there, kind of the Symphony Hall there of Nashville. And I remember coming up to you. This was one of the best moments of my life. I have to say thank you for this, Jay, to our listening audience. Jay, I remember we were down there, and I don't know if you remember this, but they were giving the awards in advance. They're like giving the medallions, each of the recipients, the ceremony part of it. And we're downstairs, and it's a room maybe filled with a couple hundred people, right? And I'd heard that James Burton, the lead guitar player, for Elvis and Ricky Nelson and everybody, but I knew his stuff. I heard he was in the room, and I remember I just wanted to see him. I just wanted to know who he was, point him. So I walked up to you and I'm like, hey, Jay, can you point? I heard James Burton's in the room. Can you point him out? I'd just love to see him and, maybe take a picture from a distance. And you're like, you want to meet him? I was like, yeah, but of course, and then you took me right to him, and he's there talking with some nice folks. And you kind of, when they finished talking, and they were in the corner having some hors d'oeuvres and drinks, and you're like, hey, I want to introduce you to Deven Berryhill. He plays with his dad's band, the Safaris. And man, I have to tell you, he was so nice, and you were awesome. I was just, chin on the floor moment for me. I was blown out.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you had a good time with that. What I love about those situations, and they happen in Nashville somewhat regularly, where you look around and you realize my record collection is standing in this room, and you find yourself in those surreal situations. And somebody like James Burton, I've listened to you since I can remember, since I've been alive. I've listened to your guitar playing, and then as you get older and you start connecting the dots of different types of music, then you start realizing like, oh, the same guy playing on that early 70s Elvis stuff was playing on the Ricky Nelson stuff and was playing Suzy Q, and kind of putting it together. And then for him to just be a person standing there having some terms, it is a pinch me kind of thing. And I it's not lost on me either. I'm glad that you were able to have that experience, because I've gotten to have that experience and feel so lucky. And like I say, to be able to, and it's also humbling. What are you going to say to him that he hasn't heard? Whatever you said to him that day, he's probably heard it 7 times that day alone. It almost gets to a point where like, there's nothing else I can say to this person. He knows that he's touched our lives and how special it is to us.
Yeah.
I'm just another guy in this long line of people saying, I really love your music, and but I also know that he appreciates that, and he does like hearing it. We all have egos, and it's that is part of it. But James has been really, really good to the museum, and he's also been a guest on the Backstage show as well.
That's one of the things that weekend that we spent there with you guys. We got to meet Vince Gill. We got to meet Garth Brooks. I mean, I remember being backstage there off to the side, and my mom and I, it was kind of dark, that little place right before you went onto the side stage. There's a little hallway that had all the TV equipment and everything kind of laid around. You had to kind of hike over some cables. It was really dimly lit, kind of blue light thing. And my mom's there, and I needed to ask my mom something. Of course, she plays bass for the Safari. And I couldn't see who she was talking to. And I walked up, and I'm like, I kind of interrupted on accident because I couldn't really see. It was so dark. I look over there, I go, hey, Mom, I got to get this piece of equipment, or we need something, whatever. And she's talking with Garth Brooks. And he's dressed like he just came off the farm. Here we are at the Schermerhorn Theater, and he's like looking like he just, whacked down a few weeds on the back 40, right? And I turn over, and my mom's like, honey, I want to introduce you to Garth Brooks. And I'm like, what? I look, and I'm like, holy crap, that's Garth Brooks. He gets that every day, right? But he sat there, and here's the quality of the people that were there that I was so like, amazed by, was how much time they spent. Jay Burton just spent time with me. I think I had 4 major conversations with Paul Schaefer, who hosted the show, right? As you know. I was just so down to earth. He's like, so Deven, how long have you been Safaris? I'm like, really? You gotta be kidding me. I'm like, well, it's my dad. And Garth Brooks, I kept trying to leave the conversation and respect his time, because I think he was playing with Steve Wariner or somebody, or Vince Gill, right? And I was, you know how you get in those situations, I don't want to waste your time. I'm nice to meet you. I'll be over here kind of moment. And he kept like, no, don't, like, come back. tell me about what's going on with the Berryhill family. We're like, okay. And he really wanted to know. And I'm like, wow, that note to self there. You know, these guys are huge, and yet they still wanted to hear about us. We're just, you know, little surf Southern California.
And it's, I guess that's the power of music is you realize that they have things that reached them when they were younger, and certain songs, you know, Wipeout, you know, certainly is on Garth Brooks's radar. And so that's another thing that's fascinating with the museum is music can be so important to us personally. It's such an important personal thing. A song can reach us and change us, and we put so much weight into certain art, and not just music, art. But it's funny and fascinating to meet someone who was involved in one of these recordings, because I've grown up and it's this cinematic, amazing,
legends,
superpower, legendary thing. And you meet the guitar player, and I want them to share some mystical behind the scenes thing, and they'll be like, I don't really even remember that session, or you know, or I was hungover and my wife was nagging me, and it was in this, you know, this nasty little dingy smoke-filled studio, and I felt, you know, like I was trying not to cough during the recording, you know, like this.
Right.
Such a different, you know, to me, I've grown up listening to this bigger than life thing, and it's funny and disappointing sometimes to hear the reality and the perspective from them, that, you know, that's their perspective, that they don't realize it went all over the world and reached all these you know, across generations and across levels of income and across you know, these different cultures. And yet you know, take rock and roll, it's, you know, it's poor Southern hillbillies finding the blues and morphing this music together. And that's still, I mean, it's not really right to call it a religion. I know it's not a religion, but it's taken on this religious overtones, and it has that kind of power. It is tapping into that power. And that's fascinating to me.
So one of the questions I always ask our guests is, what would the Jay McDowell of today go back and tell the 20-year-old Jay McDowell? Maybe a word of wisdom or two.
Well, I would say, do not be afraid to fail, because you're going to fail. And that's, you know, that if anything I've learned growing up is how much you have to fail to succeed. That's part of it. So many times creatively you hold back for fear of being vulnerable or putting yourself out there, and you know, think how many times, you know, Dolly Parton, how many songs she's written that we've never heard or have just fallen flat, but she kept cranking them out, and that leads to the gold. And you know, different producers that or record labels that put things out. And I didn't how many singles Booker T and the MGs put out. They've put out tons of singles, and we don't know them all. There, you know, there's records that have been put out that just fall flat, and they're going to the next one. Okay, well, let's try this one. And then, you know, of course they have a few monster hits and big success, and we look at it like, oh gosh, everything they do is platinum. And that's not the case.
Right.
So that's what I would tell myself as a 20-year-old. That's what I would tell people starting out, is put stuff out there. Yeah, you're vulnerable. It is part of the game, but you have to, you know, realize that you're going to fail a lot more than you're going to succeed. And the people that are successful have failed more than I have. So that's all I got.
Didn't they say Paul McCartney and John Lennon, they had maybe like 3,500 songs and only 1,500 of them are actually recorded?
I believe that. I don't know, but I believe it. And you know, an example I use a lot is Thomas Edison. You know, think of how many things he worked on that could be laughed at now because they fell on their face. But, you know, look at what he accomplished.
Well, I'll tell you, I really appreciate you, and I know my family does. You and Joe Chambers have been amazing. There's more stories we could go on and on with, but I really appreciate you coming on the program. And, you know, I highly recommend, if you're in Nashville, you have to go to the Musicians Hall of Fame. You'll see, I mean, just off the top of my head, the things that I've been impressed with have been like the guitar that played the lick on the guitar opener on Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison. I mean, that was a highlight. Or you walk in and it's the drum set that they used on Green Onions with Booker T and the MGs. You know, they've got a whole California exhibit. You got to go see my dad's reverb tank. That's kind of cool for me.
We have
there's a whole section on surf
that was used on Wipeout, and I love that there's no middle reaction. It's people are either floored and can't believe that they're standing in front of that little Fender reverb unit, or they look at it and say, eh. And there's no middle ground. It's all or nothing. But the whole museum is that way. It's these instruments that played on the hits that you've grown up listening to, and the stories behind them, and such such a big part of the story is how black and white cultures have come together and worked together, and that's such a common thread in all these music scenes years and still happening. And like I tell visitors, when you mix different types of music together, that's where the magic happens. It's also where the train wrecks happen and some of the worst outcomes happen. But taking different elements of different music and putting it together is where 1 and 1 can equal 3. And that's a real common thread with the museum. So yes, when you're in Nashville, please come see the Musicians Hall of Fame. And if I'm there, bug me. I'll be happy to show you something cool behind the scenes and some little more of the context of the exhibit and something behind the music that can open your eyes, open your ears to an old song that you've heard your whole life.
And if people want to get a hold of you or maybe see more about the Musicians Hall of Fame, where would they go? Maybe a website or? Yeah,
musicianshalloffame.com, JAY@musicianshalloffame.com will reach me. And of course,
what's the YouTube channel?
The YouTube channel is Musicians Hall of Fame. Just search for Musicians Hall on YouTube.com, and you can click on all those videos. And that is a rabbit hole that you can really get lost in.
Oh yeah,
a lot of great stuff.
I've seen all of them. I mean, they're amazing. I love them. Well, Jay, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on Creatives Who Thrive show. It's been a pleasure and an honor for me, and I can't wait to be in Nashville in August. So, well, hopefully we can have that coffee we talked about.
Absolutely, and I want to say happy birthday.
Oh, that's right. Yesterday was my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thanks so much, Jay, and
good luck
one of these days I want to see you. Oh yeah, thank you.
Good luck with all that, and I just spoke with your dad this morning. You've got some safari dates coming up, I believe, out in your neck of the woods, right? So.
Yeah, we're doing the first time the Tourmaliners and the Safaris are going to play together. 2 dates, June 15th and 16th, out here in the West. So we'll have to do that in Nashville someday. Yep, right on.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for coming on the show.